Hello and welcome to Airheads, a not-so-serious look at the serious business of royal rumours, gossip and gowns. I'm Tom.
And I'm Maeve.
Unfortunately, we are recording this before the announcement of the Earthshot Prize.
I know, I feel like we've been waiting for this moment all of our lives. Well, for the best part of a year since it was announced.
Well, since it was announced that they were going to announce it, yeah.
Sorry, that's what I meant. But it is happening on a Sunday night and we won't get a chance to talk about it, so we'll have to talk about it on our next episode. I'm sure this is going to be dominating the airwaves for weeks, if not months.
If not years to come.
So we'll be back to run through Earthshot Prize next time, but there has been some other royals and the environment stuff we can talk about now.
Yeah, because this week it was announced that when the Queen goes to the COP26 summit in Glasgow in November, she's going to be joined by Charles, Camilla, Will and Kate.
She's got the whole gang.
Is that a royal flush? I don't know. But they've all got a lot to say, it seems. Like, even the Queen. She was apparently overheard saying to Camilla and a Welsh official at the opening of the Welsh Parliament that it's really irritating when they talk but they don't do.
Oh, totally, so true.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is ridiculous because she's being treated by the papers as though she's like Greta Thunberg or something. And like how she's got this righteous fury at the like world leaders not doing enough.
She really let them have it, didn't she?
Yeah, in this overheard remark to somebody in Wales.
She didn't hold back.
But I actually find it more irritating when they talk but then secretly lobby to make themselves exempt from clean energy bills in the country that they're going to be travelling to discuss climate change.
Yeah, I feel like there were probably some Scottish people who were maybe thinking that as the one person in Scotland who is exempt from climate law, the Queen is doing a lot of talking and not doing herself.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of talking, Charles gave an opening speech at a UN biodiversity conference hosted by China.
Charles called for polluters to pay more for the carbon they emit and for a price to be placed on the value of nature.
Yeah, he urged China to follow the lead of its ancestors, pointing to how Chinese civilization has had, for thousands of years, an intimate understanding of nature. Now, the Chinese president, Xi Jinping, invited Charles to make this speech, but I did think it was kind of weird to have Charles lecturing the Chinese on their ancestors' values.
But so Charles.
Yeah, so Charles to be like, the ancient wisdom of the East.
And it was Chinese leaders that he had written about in his like diary entries that were leaked before, wasn't that it?
Yeah. He's much more comfortable interfering with Chinese government than he is, for example, the Saudi royal family and their litany of human rights abuses.
And, you know, Charles has been reminding everyone that he's been talking about the environment for quite a long time. He pointed out that even Extinction Rebellion recognised that he's been banging this drum for many years. All the same, this is a man who runs several households in multiple countries and takes helicopters pretty much constantly.
Yeah, and like that's not even to get into the whole stuff about like royal land and the lack of tree coverage, which Chris Packham wrote a good piece for The Guardian this week about how bad the royal lands are for the environment. But like, does Charles really think we're going to identify with him when he tells us that his Aston Martin runs on wine and cheese?
We talked about this before.
Yeah.
Around like when he was doing all that James Bond stuff. I remember us talking about that. But I think the reason he brought it up again is because he was asked if he's quite a petrol head. Right? So, I can't remember who was interviewing him, but they were like, oh, you're a bit like Jeremy Clarkson, are you? Like, and he was like, well, actually, my car runs on cheese. Like, it's like, I'm sure that's very scalable for all drivers, all motorists.
But we also noticed that posters have been put up near where we live with pictures of Charles encouraging people to put themselves on a warlike footing to tackle the climate crisis.
Yeah, they're sort of... We should take a picture and put it on Instagram next time we see them. But they're sort of reminiscent of those, like, Uncle Sam kind of, like, America Needs You kind of ones. And I was looking this up because I was like, why the hell are they putting these up in East London? But apparently this was something that he has been doing since September 2020, which I guess we somehow missed, or maybe just thought it was so boring. But he wants people to approach our action from the perspective of a military-style campaign.
Right.
Which seemed to me like totally at odds with, you know, the population in this area.
Yeah.
But it does seem like he's aiming for an older audience by making lots of references to a Marshall-like plan.
But this kind of military language certainly doesn't appeal to us.
No. Prince William was also out doing some hyping up of the Earthshot Prize this week. He spoke to the BBC's newscast. And he was saying some, like, pretty annoying things. Like, he kept talking about how, like, Prince George just hates litter bugs. Yeah. And how, like, litter's a really big problem. It's like, fuck off, man. There are way bigger problems than, like, George having to do the same, like, route on his litter-picking run at school and getting annoyed that there's Coke cans again when he picked the Coke cans up yesterday.
And, like, also, like, a low-key agenda of, like, even the king after me will care about the environment. We're all in safe hands because he doesn't like litter. Like, more, it seems like he doesn't like having to do the same thing 2 days in a row.
Yeah, that's what stood out to me. It was like, I already did this. Why do I have to do it again? But he is a child. The thing that really caught people's attention from this interview Will did was his comment on the billionaire space race. He said, "We need some of the world's greatest brains and minds fixed on trying to repair this planet, not trying to find the next place to go and live. I think that ultimately is what sold it for me, that it really is quite crucial to be focusing on this planet rather than giving up and heading out into space to try and think of solutions for the future."
Yeah, he told Adam Fleming at Newscast that he had absolutely no interest in going as high as space, adding there was a fundamental question over the carbon cost of space flights.
You know, it's not just space flights.
Yeah.
We've got some questions over the carbon cost of his private jet flights to Northern Ireland the other week. Indeed, his private jet flights every other weekend, it seems.
Yeah. And, like, you know, a long history of private jets to Mustique and, you know, all over the globe. But, I mean, yes, of course, like, there's a problem with space tourism.
I wonder if, you know, one of these people he's talking about, you've obviously got Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, but also Richard Branson, who, as we know, was a guest at the wedding of Will and Kate. So why doesn't he reach out to his old buddy and talk to him directly?
Yeah, rather than obliquely in the press. Like, yeah. But William Shatner, who recently became the oldest man to go into space, said of Will's perspective, "That's inane."
I love this quote. He told Entertainment Tonight, "He's a lovely Englishman. He's going to be King of England one day. He's a lovely, gentle, educated man, but he's got the wrong idea."
It's like just incredibly dismissive. I love it. It's so good. But, like, yeah, I mean, it is really frustrating seeing billionaires rushing to promote space tourism and these kind of, like, flashy stunt flights, while their companies encourage or profit from some of the worst social and economic inequality on this planet. But these comments from Will, I just think, come across as so hypocritical, not only because of, like we said, the carbon cost of his own flights and lifestyle, but also because, like, his family business basically set the template for space colonization and resource exploitation. So, like, maybe just, like, have a look at the context of where you're coming from and moderate your comments accordingly.
Yeah, I feel like all of this stuff that Will's been doing with the environment just makes him look so oblivious and, like, completely lacking in self-awareness.
Yeah.
And you wonder why nobody is saying to him, like, the same way that when Prince Harry was doing all the Travelist stuff, that they were really pushing him to address his own private jet use.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't seem to be part of the conversation with Will and Earthshot at all.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we've heard a lot about the planning for the Earthshot Prize ceremony on Sunday night at Alexandra Palace, and there's all this stuff about how the guests are only people that are already in London, that they're not going to be allowed to be flying in just for the event, and certainly not by private jet, that they'll be appearing virtually, and all this stuff about, like, Coldplay's performance is going to be powered by cyclists, or like, I don't know, all this kind of stuff, like really bigging up this aspect of it without anybody saying, oh, like, didn't Will and Kate get a private jet to Northern Ireland like 2 weeks ago.
Like, Northern Ireland is so close. It's
I know.
so... The people who have access to family homes all across all countries of the United Kingdom. So they could do the journey in different parts, for fuck's sake. Like, there is no reason for them to get a private jet to Northern Ireland. We've all got nothing but time at the moment. Like, it's... Yeah, I mean, we're not asking the royals to be perfect, but I would just like to see them stop trying to build this legacy of, like, climate activism that is so totally at odds with their own lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like, it's really gross.
It is, Tom. I'm with you there.
Something
also
else.
Gross.
Yeah.
Prince Andrew. Let's talk about Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
The Metropolitan Police announced this week that it will not take any further action against Prince Andrew following a review prompted by Virginia Giuffre, who, as we know, is suing Andrew in America for allegedly sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager, allegations that Andrew has consistently denied.
Back in August, after Virginia filed her lawsuit, the Met Commissioner, Cressida Dick, said no one is above the law and that she had asked her team to have another look at the material. It's not the first time.
Yeah, I guess I'd sort of forgotten that there had already been 2 previous reviews of this case in 2016 and 2019. Like, that's only 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And this time, Cressida Dick said they were going to consider whether there was evidence of a crime and whether the UK was the right jurisdiction for the case to be dealt with. And there's a little bit of sort of confusion over whether the Met talked to Virginia, because the Times reported that officers had spoken to Virginia about her allegation, but they wouldn't confirm if they'd taken a formal statement from her. But then 2 days after that Times report came out, the Telegraph reported the complete opposite. They said officers did not speak to Ms. Giuffre before deciding not to pursue her claims, the Telegraph can reveal, despite a report to the contrary.
I mean, I would have thought that talking to her would be quite an important part.
Seems like the bare minimum.
Yeah, yeah. So this seems like, to me...
If that is true.
Yeah, a bit of a smokescreen, or just for show, this review. But a source close to Andrew told PA Media it had come as no surprise that the Met had decided to drop its investigation. They said, despite pressure from the media and claims of new evidence, the Met have concluded that the claims are not sufficient to warrant any further investigation. The Duke has always vigorously maintained his innocence and continues to do so.
And on the other side, Virginia's US lawyer Sigmund Macaulay told the Sunday Times, given the clear and compelling evidence implicating Prince Andrew, the Metropolitan Police should reopen its investigation and stand by their statement that no one is above the law. I was interested that the Telegraph pointed out that Virginia apparently has never formally complained to Scotland Yard that she was raped by Prince Andrew, and that if she had done that, it could pave the way for the force to open a criminal investigation and question Andrew. So I guess it sounds to me like the thing that Cressida Dick mentioned about the jurisdiction seems to be a big part of it.
Right, okay.
I mean, it's still bullshit, but I guess that's the Telegraph sort of explaining what might be going on here.
I mean, something that is always just playing in the back of my mind is that, like, the Met provides security for the royals.
Yeah, since they pointed that out in that Channel 4, the dispatches thing, it's just unforgettable.
And, I mean, the way my mind is working on this is, like, surely if they have a, record of where these officers were at what times, they could just say, like, well, Andrew wasn't there. And then that could be made, public, and then it would all be over. The fact that they haven't done that, I mean, maybe there's a lot of, confidentiality issues or something, but it just keeps making me so suspicious.
I know. I mean, this is definitely something that we have no understanding of.
Oh, yeah. Of course, absolutely not.
Total speculation. The Met also confirmed that it had completed its review into allegations reported in June by Channel 4 News that Ghislaine Maxwell had trafficked, groomed and abused women and girls in the UK. The Met said it had reviewed information passed to us by a media organisation in June and decided that no further action will be taken. So that was pretty disappointing as well, I thought. Mm. I wasn't expecting a whole lot with the Andrew stuff. Yeah. But Ghislaine Maxwell, I thought she'd be a pretty obvious one.
Yeah. I don't like this kind of feeling that she might be off limits in some way.
So what is next for Andrew? He has until the 29th of October to respond to Virginia's civil suit. As we've said before, his team are reportedly working hard to get this case thrown out by using that settlement agreement from 2009, which Virginia had with Jeffrey Epstein, and that was also used in the Dershowitz case to get that thrown out, or partially thrown out. Or their other strategy is to challenge jurisdiction.
They can't get it thrown out. The Telegraph says that Fergie is likely to be subpoenaed because Andrew mentioned her being away while giving his Pizza Express alibi. And they also said that the discovery stage of the case will be pretty traumatic for the royals, according to a courtier.
Yeah, the Telegraph said that Andrew might also try to reach a settlement with Virginia to avoid this all playing out in court. But I think, as the Telegraph points out, that kind of thing would be likely to be taken as an admission of guilt over here, even though apparently that is like common practice in the US.
Yeah.
And they might have quite different understanding of it. But I feel like they might try to avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, that does nothing to repair his reputation whatsoever over here. It'll just confirm it in a lot of people's minds. I just think it's so funny to me. I mean, none of this is funny, but like the idea that the discovery stage will be traumatic for the royals. It's like every time there's a possibility of us seeing the private lives of these people, they're like, this is going to be devastating for them. Like, what are they up to the whole time that we're not allowed to see anything?
But also, again, revealing a complete lack of self-awareness when you're talking about a woman who is speaking about being raped and being treated as a sex slave, and they're using words like traumatic. Because they don't know anything about trauma.
Yeah, like, because we might find out when they went to Pizza Express. Like,
for the time being, though, Andrew is still hiding out in Windsor. I was really struck that he only met Princess Beatrice's daughter, Sienna, when Beatrice and Edo brought Sienna up to see Andrew in Windsor 2 weeks after she was born.
I know. It's just so awkward when your dad is in hiding after you've given birth and you have to travel around the country.
But I also just think it's really upsetting. Like, if you're having your first kid and your dad's not going to come see it for 2 weeks, like, that's shitty dad behaviour, in my opinion. When the only thing he's doing, like, it's not like he's working. He's just cowering in his mansion. But the first remote hearing in Virginia's civil suit is scheduled for the 3rd of November. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that on the next episode.
But the other big royal story, I suppose, from this week was the fact that the Queen on Tuesday was seen using a walking stick in public for the first time in 17 years. And that last time was when she had knee surgery in 2014.
So the Queen was attending an event at Westminster Abbey this week for the centenary of the Royal British Legion. And while she was there, she also took a shorter route to her seat than usual. And she's always gone to Westminster Abbey. But a royal source told the Telegraph that the move had been made for the Queen's comfort and that the use of the walking stick wasn't for any specific medical reason. I was really surprised by the conversation around this. I saw Camilla Tominey, the Telegraph's royal reporter, wrote in her weekly newsletter that palace sources say this is likely to become a more common occurrence for the Queen, and she did use the same cane again to open the Welsh Parliament in Cardiff on Thursday too. And to me, this just seems like completely reasonable. Like, the Queen is 95.
Yeah.
It's frankly like surprising that she hasn't had to use some kind of mobility aid before now.
Yeah, and I was like surprised to see so many skeptics who were suggesting that the cane was some kind of prop designed to engender sympathy by making her look, quote, fragile or weak.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of the sort of conspiracy theories around this week really rely on those kind of ableist stereotypes. And, you know, it goes without saying that using a cane isn't a sign of weakness. It's the opposite, and it is enabling the Queen to remain active and independent and freely moving around. But I think because those ableist stereotypes persist, we can just briefly talk about this, that, you know, if the Queen did want more sympathy, I don't think she would do that by trying to make herself appear, quote unquote, weaker.
No way. I mean, we've seen tactics from her camp before, and in order to get sympathy for the Queen, what they normally do is make the rest of the royals look weaker. They normally try to position her as someone who has to manage everybody else's bullshit. Or
they'll do things like get the former staff member to talk about how she was really nice to them when a member of their family wasn't doing well, or that she was really nice to their kids, or something that she's like a nice, like, cozy, cuddly granny, but not, you know, she's on death's door.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of the opposite of what they want you to think, especially when we've been talking for the last, I mean, basically the whole time this podcast has been existing, but mostly since lockdown, about Prince Charles and kind of in a way Prince Will's sort of shadow regencies and the sort of Game of Thrones that has been going on, I think the Queen would want to reassure people she isn't going anywhere, not emphasize her age.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like, this is coming from someone who absolutely loves conspiracy theories about the Queen, and I, believe that she is evil.
And I do think they do have a lot of tactics to engender certain feelings from the public, whether it's pictures of them eating lunch in a pub or getting a budget flight or, those kind of things are, in my mind, designed to elicit that kind of response. But in this case, I don't think that applies. And I think it's quite disrespectful to suggest that it is.
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily disrespectful to the Queen, but disrespectful to people who use mobility aids.
Yes, that's what I meant.
But we finally get to the part of the podcast we've been looking forward to the most.
The meat and potatoes, is that what you mean, Tom?
I love hot vegetables, as Diana would say. Yes, we got to go and see Spencer, the new Pablo Larrain film about Diana, starring Kristen Stewart, at the London Film Festival last week.
Yeah, and I'm sure regular listeners will know we have been dying to see this film. It was extremely exciting for us. We are big Kristen Stewart fans. I think both of us were big fans of Jackie, Pablo Larrain's film about Jackie Kennedy in 2016. There is a lot of hype around this Spencer being a sort of Oscar vehicle for Kristen Stewart, and we know from talking to you guys a lot of trepidation from people who are not Kristen Stewart fans, who maybe only know Kristen Stewart from Twilight, don't think she can pull off a Diana performance, all that kind of thing.
Just free your minds, guys. I honestly think you're just living in a self-made tiny little box, and there's just so much world out there for you to see.
I thought we could talk first about our sort of general, like our overall thoughts.
Yeah. We're not going to spoil the ending of this film.
Oh, yeah.
But we are going to talk about a few moments in it. If you're very spoiler averse, we'll give a timestamp in the show notes so you can skip ahead to when we talk about the Diana musical.
But, it also covers a lot of familiar ground that people who know the Diana story, it's not exactly spoiling things. But anyway, I did think what was most striking, unsurprising, but striking to me, was how much of a sort of art piece this film is.
Yeah.
And I do think it won't be the kind of film that appeals to royal obsessives or very avid fans of The Crown.
The people who watch The Crown and were like, well, Olivia Colman's got brown eyes rather than blue eyes, so I won't be watching. It's not that kind of like royal biopic.
Yeah, it's very much an unconventional approach to this story. The film bills itself as a fable from a true tragedy at the start. And I think that sort of unreality, that sort of quality, I think is very present throughout. Even in something as small as, I know there was a big discussion around the engagement ring that Kristen Stewart wears in the film, and that it's not an exact replica of Diana's ring. And that's something that I think we all know would be incredibly easy to get right.
I got an exact replica of that from Morrison's 10 years ago.
For like £1.
Yeah.
But, I think that sort of thing sort of gives you an insight into what kind of approach they're taking in this film. That accuracy isn't the priority. It's taking a more audacious approach to the Diana story than we've seen before. And rather than trying to chronicle her whole life story, it focuses on 3 days over Christmas at Sandringham. So it's a Christmas movie.
There's no specific year given, and the costume references were taken from a period of about 4 years. But Harry and Will are pretty young. Like, the actors that play them are 12 and 10 years old. So that kind of gives you an idea of the time period it's set in.
Yeah. And I think this is probably the most unflattering take on Diana that I have seen, which isn't a bad thing.
No, I mean, it shows Diana as like a complex, troubled woman, imagines her outside of the media narrative of a people's princess, and it really allows her to be her own person, I think.
Yeah, I think especially, if you're used to watching The Crown, for instance, and I think some people were frustrated that there were certain parts of the Diana story that weren't told in The Crown because it's more interested in Diana in the context of the monarchy.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, it's more interested in Diana as her own person rather than how she fits in with the Queen and Charles. The Queen and Charles are barely in it, but we'll get to that in a minute. When we meet Diana in the film, she is driving herself to Sandringham for Christmas without any security detail, and she gets lost on the way. So she sort of wanders into this diner and stuns everyone by asking for directions.
Yeah, and then she's back on the road and she's like already late for Christmas. She stops near her old house. She kind of stomps through this muddy field in her high heels and takes her father's old coat off a scarecrow outside. And then she starts like talking to it throughout the movie, and it's like really incredible. But that kind of gives you a sense of where we're going with this.
Yeah, I think that combination of sequences is a good way of establishing that Diana is very troubled and she's very isolated, but also that she craves attention and the limelight, the way that she responds to the people when she walks into the diner, for example. And, you know, as we said, we're not going to spoil everything that happens, but you have probably heard that she talks to the ghost of Anne Boleyn in this film. And I think those kind of scenes might be quite alienating for people who might be expecting a more conventional biopic, but I definitely thought it was a very unusual and very fresh way of telling this story, and particularly of exploring the interiority of Diana's character, since she has almost no one around to talk to other than her dad's coat and her dresser Maggie, who's played by Sally Hawkins.
But yeah, that's what makes it stand out, I think, compared to other versions of the Diana story. Like we said, it's interested in Diana as her own person. You don't get that context of like you said, the monarchy, but also that kind of global worship of Diana isn't really present in this. And I mean, it could be the fact that like the director, Pablo Larrain, is Chilean, and he might not have the kind of deference that so many people feel.
Yeah, I think he's not coming to this with the baggage that a British filmmaker, for instance, might. And, you know, even someone like Peter Morgan, you know, if you're raised in this country and you grow up with the Queen and the royals and all that stuff, you like necessarily just have a different idea of the royals than someone outside. So I think that makes it feel very different to other iterations of this story. I
mean, like, even, you know, when we were talking about this film on, I think, a previous episode, I assumed, even when I was talking about, like, oh, he'll probably have, like, a lack of deference, I just thought it was towards the Queen and the rest of the royals. I had still kind of assumed that there would be a deference to Diana. And I think that is part of, like, me being British and having been brought up in England and stuff. So I was really surprised at his approach to Diana, and it's definitely part of why I enjoy the film so much.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I don't want people to think that we're saying, like, he's really disrespectful or something.
No.
It's just that can be kind of an obstacle, because you maybe don't want to show things that might be unflattering or whatever. But I think as well, there is a sort of extra layer to this in having Kristen Stewart, another woman who was very young when she became famous and suffered, like, horrendous treatment by the world media and the paparazzi and all that kind of stuff. So there is that sort of meta commentary of fame. If you're a big K-Stew fan, like I am, then maybe that's something that you'd be interested in as well.
So there are very graphic scenes depicting her bulimia in the film, and in general it gives a lot of insight into the impact that kind of severe chronic mental illness can have, both on the person that's suffering it and on their family. And I think that's kind of one of the things we're talking about when we're saying it's not a flattering depiction of Diana, because this is the first time we've really seen it suggested that Diana wasn't a perfect mother.
I know, I think, you know, even in other films where she has affairs or she fights with Charles or whatever, it's always the saintly mother that it sort of comes back to. But I think this film does show how difficult it was for William, especially, still a very young child, like 12-ish years old at that time, but she's old enough to know something was going on, and the kind of position that she puts him in throughout the film. You know, we won't go into detail about it, but there's things like that you really feel so much sympathy for Will and Harry, as you do always in these stories. But I think usually when I think about it, I'm like, oh, well, they were just such small kids. Yeah. But because Will is sort of on the verge of being a teenager, she sort of treats him a little bit more like an adult in a way that is very difficult, I think, for poor Prince William.
Something we talked about a bit when we were, like, discussing Tina Brown's book is how Diana interacts with staff. And the film shows how frequently she would impose on them. Like, in particular, there's one scene where she just walks into the kitchen in the middle of the chef giving a big briefing to everyone. And, like, this film shows what a big operation it is to feed the royals over Christmas. Like, hundreds of dishes, so many people going around, like, military precision on everything. Like, you know, literally the army bring in the food. And so Diana just interrupts this briefing. Everyone has to leave apart from the head chef. And she sort of just rants at him.
Yeah, she gives this sort of rambling monologue kind of where she's asking him if he's read her Vogue magazine profile. And, you know, she sort of just wants somebody to talk to. And you kind of, I guess, feel a little bit sorry for her. But you're also, like, thinking about how just before she walks in, he's been saying, you know, we've got less than 4 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're conscious that he's on the clock and he maybe doesn't have time to entertain her rambling. But what can he do? That's the position that she's put him in. And I think as well you see that in how she dresses herself.
Yeah, she starts wearing all her Christmas outfits in the wrong order.
She has 10 outfits, I think. They
Yeah.
have them all with little labels on them that this is for Christmas morning, Christmas lunch, Christmas evening. You know, it's very strictly planned.
And we get it from her perspective first. And you see what she's feeling, that kind of oppressive feeling of having every aspect of one's life controlled down to the clothes that you're wearing. But then we get it from the perspective of the member of staff who is worried that she'll be blamed for these mistakes. And she thinks that her job could be, you know, on the line because of Diana's whims.
Yeah, and that must be so anxiety-inducing, and you can sort of see what position she's in. So I think this film just does such a good job of showing kind of that everybody's having a hard time.
Yeah. And it really gets, you know, what is in Diana Chronicles, that thing of like, yes, Diana was incredibly isolated. Of course, she went and sought out the staff, but she also packed on a whole load of emotional labour and stress onto them that is not included in their job description.
Yeah. Kristen Stewart.
Yes.
I know she's a very polarising actress, as we see in our comments every time we mention her.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I've seen some critics have called her performance in this film awkward, but for me at least, I think it was pretty much perfect for this role. I think she's only really awkward when Diana needs to be awkward, like in her interactions with other senior royals. You know, she's really capturing that kind of nervousness that Diana would have felt, you know, how much Diana hated it in Sandringham and how uncomfortable she was there, having to talk to the equerry who's played by Timothy Spall in the most Timothy Spall performance you've ever seen. Yeah. He's really good. But then we do also see her being much more natural in the scenes with Will and Harry, for example.
Yeah, I mean, you know, she goes into this environment that she hates, and part of what she wants to do is cause a bit of trouble for the rest of the royals. Like, she wants to be herself, and she wants to be awkward, and she wants to make a point. And then when you get her with the kids, and she just seems so natural, and like she's finally having a good time. And, you know, the kids are so good in this film. Like, I'm not a fan of kid acting most of the time, but I just thought that the three of them worked together so well.
Yeah. And I thought Kristen Stewart's accent work was pretty good. Like, she apparently used the same dialect coach as Emma Corrin did on The Crown. And I thought, you know, she wasn't overdoing it. I didn't think it was very distracting. Sometimes I thought she really nailed the voice.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you're not going to watch this and forget it's Kristen Stewart, because I don't think you can really have any famous actress play Diana and for you to completely fall into it. Like, Emma Corrin was an unknown, basically, before she played the role, which was, I mean, obviously she did an incredible job as well, but that was a factor in how much you believed her portrayal of Diana. That doesn't happen, I don't think, with Kristen Stewart, but I think that her performance is exceptional, and I think it works so well with what the film is trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently she was like the third choice for the film, which is crazy to me because she just seems like the ideal fit for what they're trying to do with this story.
I should be writing a letter.
In terms of the other cast, Prince Charles is played by Jack Farthing, who, if you watch Poldark, you may know him as George Warlegan. And he is so good as Charles. He's the only kind of royal that Diana has significant dialogue with in the film.
Yeah, and he's really, really good. I mean, it is a bit jarring to see someone from like a soapy British period drama like Poldark acting alongside a global Hollywood superstar like Kristen Stewart. But his performance really complements hers. Like, he similarly gets the voice down really well without it seeming like he's doing an impression. And I did think that even with quite limited screen time, he was able to get a lot of the nuance of Charles across.
The Queen is played by Stella Gunay, and she has hardly any dialogue. She has probably like 3 lines or something.
Yeah.
But I thought she made such an impression.
Yeah. She was so like cold and imposing, and the lack of like speech from her just adds to that.
Yeah, even when she's not saying anything, like the kind of what unfolds on her face is really well done. And you know, you do get the sense that the Queen is the only one who feels comfortable at Sandringham with all the like traditions, and you know that they have to be weighed as soon as they arrived and all that kind of stuff. That's something that she enjoys.
Yeah.
Compared to everyone else who seems to hate it.
And she's the one who can like just fall out of her car surrounded by 100 dogs, and like then later she just puts her headscarf on and goes off for a walk in the woods. Like, she is totally unencumbered by the rules that are going on because they're all designed to allow her to do whatever she wants.
Yeah.
So yeah, that works really well.
I wanted to mention the score because I think immediately when the film starts, the score by Johnny Greenwood, great musician.
Yeah, well, he worked on Phantom Thread, There Will Be Blood, and The Master, so that should give you like some sense of the kind of vibe he's going for with this. But it's so tense, the score.
Yeah, it's almost more like a horror film at times, like a very arty horror film. But I think it really lends a lot of suspense to the film. And I think, you know, there are a lot of times in the film where Diana is really late for something and you can feel like the strain everyone is under, and then the music as well, you feel like really tense as well, and you're just like, oh my god, come on. Like, you know, it's that kind of, I sort of feel like almost like an Uncut Gems kind of, you know, that sort of stress where the music is really doing a lot of the work as well. I thought Claire Mathen's cinematography was really beautiful.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful film, and I'm always so impressed when filmmakers can make that sort of grey winter weather look so enticing and incredibly stunning.
I know, I feel like in years to come I could watch this at Christmas because it does have a, you know, a sort of beautiful winter look to it.
And every like detail in terms of the production and set design is perfect as well. Like, speaking of the Christmas of it, there's like a great scene in the aftermath of like opening royal presents where there's like just wrapping paper left everywhere and the big tree and everything.
And I loved in the kitchen that there's that sign. I saw they posted it on their Instagram, so I don't think this is like a spoiler. That's like, keep your voices down, they can hear you.
Yeah. And you see that so early on in the film.
Yeah.
And it that does kind of set the tone as well, because I think like a lot of what Diana says in it is these kind of portentous statements which are layered with meaning. You know, you can interpret them in multiple ways.
The costumes. We've got to talk about the costumes. You know, we have been looking forward to them so much. We'd seen a lot of the paparazzi photos of KSG filming it, and there was obviously some teased in the poster and the trailer. And I just think they are stunning.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Jacqueline Duran, the costume designer, who also worked on Greta Gerwig's Little Women and Atonement, she did that famous green dress in Atonement, I wouldn't be surprised if she won the Oscar.
Oh yeah, I really hope she does. They added so much to the film.
And I think, you know, I was reading an interview with her, I think in like People magazine, where she was talking about how there were some ones that they had recreated that were very close to real outfits. And I think there's a bit where she wears like a kind of blouson jacket and jeans at the end, and she found the exact same jacket that Diana had worn. But then there's others that are just sort of imagined.
Yeah.
But they're so in keeping with what Diana would have worn.
Yeah.
And I think the way they're done is just so good. They have like the outfits from Christmas, but there's also like a montage, so there's like loads and loads of outfits throughout the film.
I particularly felt that the casual outfits felt like so familiar and kind of in keeping with the Diana that you can so easily imagine. And they go really far, I think, in this film to completing this image of her as a woman who is out of place. Like, she's the only person we see wearing jeans in Sandringham. And so you can just see, like, at a single glance how she feels about being in this environment.
The one thing that sort of struck me as odd was the first outfit that she wears, which we've seen, you guys have probably seen in the teaser image. It's the red and green and black tartan jacket with the black skirt and the white high-neck blouse. And it's so much Chanel. She's got like Chanel sunglasses, she's got a Chanel bag. I think even her high heels had the double C's on them. And that just felt like a little bit too much Chanel for me. I think we talked before about how it was rumoured that Diana didn't wear a lot of Chanel because the CNC logo reminded her of Charles and Camilla. And because Kristen Stewart in real life is an ambassador for Chanel as a fashion house, that seemed to me to be a little bit off.
Yeah.
But there is the outfit I think she wears on Christmas Day, the like red coat, that is Chanel, and that is an outfit that Diana had really worn. But there was just quite a lot of Chanel, basically, that I wasn't sure if that was the one that was sort of distracting me, because we do know that there is that rumour or that sort of legend that it reminded her of Charles and Camilla. And that's the only point where my sort of accuracy meter was like,
Yeah, and it's like, you know, accuracy doesn't matter unless it's taking you out of the story, I guess, which I suppose that's a different threshold for different people. But yeah.
True.
I think our favourite, or my favourite...
Mine too.
Was the one that is on the poster, that incredible white gown that fans out at the knee.
It's just so good. And the pearl necklace, man, I'm so excited for you guys to see the scene with the pearl necklace. It's so good.
Yeah. I'm just excited for you to see all of the outfits and just the whole of this film.
Yeah, I really hope you guys like it too, because I think it is doing something very different from The Crown and certainly very different from the next thing we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Diana the Musical.
Yeah, a total counterpoint to Spencer. We watched the Netflix recording of Diana the Musical, and like, I honestly wish I hadn't watched it.
I mean, I think because before we watched it, one of our friends watched it and sort of told us all the highlights.
Yeah.
So all the good bits I knew already.
Yeah.
And then watching it, it just seemed like it was a never-ending stream of bad parts.
Yeah, so like, unlike Spencer, the musical spans Diana's life from just before she started going out with Charles up until her death. And it features Charles, Camilla and the Queen very prominently. And
it was due to open on Broadway in March 2020, but obviously that never happened because of the pandemic. It will finally open in November in Broadway, but guys, I don't know, I wouldn't be recommending it. Netflix did film a production of it in an empty theatre, which I think is one of the problems with this, because it puts the whole thing already at a disadvantage. Because, you know, maybe if there was a packed crowd there and they were really feeling it and they were laughing and clapping and getting into it, that might have, I don't know, elevated a little bit.
Yeah, just smoothed the edges, and like, as it is, the jokes don't land when there's no one there. And like, even if they were good, you would still feel like it was kind of tripping over itself at times. And it definitely does the wigs, makeup and costumes no favours to be like filmed close up by a camera.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, those kind of things are usually designed so that you can see them from the furthest points in the theatre, but they really didn't make any adjustments for filming, and that like just really shows, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, the show is bad. There's some totally fine singing and acting going on. Like, the problem is not to do with any of the people performing, I don't think. It's exactly what you expect from this kind of production. But the problem is the songs all sound the same, and the wigs are really bad. And the story of Diana just, to me, seems totally at odds with this medium of musical theatre.
And Tom and I are both very big musical fans.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like you know, I'm sure there are lots of people who don't like musicals and would just hate this start to finish. But I love musicals. So do you. And I was very open to this idea of a Diana musical, and unfortunately was very disappointed. I think the portrayal of Diana is part of the issue. It's much more the Diana that we see in things like the Naomi Watts film, more kind of conventional. It doesn't really say anything new about Diana. And I think it's not like the saintly portrayal. We do get a lot about the James Hewitt affair, including a whole number for him. But she also doesn't really feel like a real person, I think.
Well, yeah, it's like when you have, you know, all of Diana's life in 2 hours, she just becomes a series of events.
Yeah, it's sort of trying to do too much and ends up just not doing enough.
Yeah, and it definitely panders to fans of Diana.
Yeah, I think so. Especially, you know, there are so many outfits in this, and it's sort of almost like a box ticking, like, oh, there's the black sheep jumper, and there's the revenge dress. You know, all of the fan favorites are in it.
Yeah.
But it still falls flat, I think.
Because I think people who are fans of Diana will probably be kind of like offended by the musical itself, no matter how many outfits you put into it.
I thought we could talk about some of our favourite lines.
Okay, well, yeah, we've got to start with
the best one.
Better than a Guinness, better than a wank. Snatch a few pics and it's money in the bank.
That shocked me, that lyric. I can't believe they used the word wank.
Yeah.
I guess maybe it's not that common in America.
Yeah, possibly. But, like, the whole thing with the paparazzi was really weird anyway. The way they were, like, from the 1940s and they were, like, these kind of cartoon villains.
Yeah, I think, you know, it was sort of trying to be like a zany romp of a number.
Yeah.
And because we all know how she died, it renders that null and void, because you just can't enjoy those kind of cartoonish villains, like you say, when we understand how that tabloid, the paparazzi culture, played a role in her death.
Yeah, and, you know, not just her death, but, like, the deterioration of her mental health in the years leading up to her death.
It did sort of remind me of when we talked about the Toni Collette, Dominic West film, Diana and Me, and how trying to play it for laughs. It sort of, I mean, when I was watching this musical, I did feel the entire time that it was incredibly dated.
Yeah.
And these jokes did feel like the kind of jokes maybe people would have made in the like 80s or 90s, like before Diana died, and that maybe it would have been considered funny back then, but it just absolutely doesn't land at all now, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, that line, better than Guinness, better than wank, that is so similar to what Dominic West says when he's describing the feeling of getting the picture of Diana that everyone wants in the Toni Collette movie. But, like, does that have a place in, like you're saying, a zany number like this?
My favourite number after that was the sort of dream sequence that Diana has when they go to the classical music concert, the Bach concert, and she imagines what life would be like if Charles liked rock music.
The song is called This Is How Your People Dance, and it features some of the most bizarrely dated choreography I've ever seen, and an equally weird dress reveal.
Oh my god. So she's wearing, I'm sure you guys have seen, she's wearing this like green floor-length gown, and then she sort of tears part of it away, and there's like this sort of ragged lace frock underneath with a chain. I guess it's meant to be sort of like Madonna.
Yeah.
But it also has the top of the green dress still on it, and it just looks like it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't look like a Madonna dress. It just looks like some sort of Franken dress.
It looks like a mistake. And it's certainly the kind of thing that if you were in even just the affordable seats, not even the cheap seats, you'd be like, what? What's going on here? But yeah, and this is also the song where she says, but if Queen were playing, Freddie Mercury would slay!
It's so bad.
Oh god, the whole thing is awful. But yeah, the choreography, the like jabbing hands.
Oh my god.
Like, given that the whole thing is meant to be like showing Charles how his country dances, it's like I've never seen anyone dance like this.
We weren't around in the 80s. Perhaps this is how people danced to Duran Duran and we just never knew.
Yeah, maybe, but
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay, another good moment. good line is when she says, "Baby Charles, I'm going to have your baby Charles. Does that make you happy, Charles?"
That song was so awful.
Harry, my gingerhead son.
You'll be second to none. You'll always be second to none.
I mean, famously second to at least one.
Those were so bad. I thought James Hewitt's shirtless entrance, I think that's the opening number of Act 2, was so wild. Like, it was meant to be like a really rollicking, good time number, and it was just sort of felt like a really like budget, like hen party style. Yeah.
Because he has that wig on.
That terrible wig.
Awful wig.
I think also how prominent Barbara Cartland is felt really weird to me. Like, it just felt so dated. Like, I don't think people now, like, you know, if there are younger generations, obviously Diana is really popular with Gen Z. Did they know who Barbara Cartland is? Like, if they've even heard the name, would they understand who she is enough to understand why she has such a big role in this? And like, it just again fell flat for me. Like, the jokes were not hitting.
Yeah, and I think part of that is that she was like a panto dame kind of figure in an empty auditorium.
Yeah.
And like, so much of what she's trying to do involves like getting the audience on side and like breaking the fourth wall and stuff. And it just felt very awkward the whole time. So that really worked against her.
And I think, you know, it's also just boring, the musical.
Yeah.
Like, at one point, I checked how much was left, and there was like an hour, and I just couldn't believe that we had to do another hour of it. Yeah. And, you know, that's the kind of suffering that we do for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, like, even when, you know, they had a musical number in an HIV/AIDS ward with the line, "I may be unwell, but I'm handsome as hell." Like,
they just love these rhyming couplets.
Yeah.
The lyrics, like that kind of writing as well, just feels so dated. Like, everything about it is like, you know, has someone had this lying around since the 80s and just pulled it out? Like, it's so stale.
Yeah, I mean, as with the choreography and the staging, it all felt stale. And like, the really laboured visual puns, like Diana and Camilla in a boxing ring, like, it just feels so aggressive and like it's from a different time.
Yeah.
But like, we've been talking to each other recently about how much Diana content is too much Diana content. And I think it's a very important story for anti-monarchists. Like, it's a personal, in many ways relatable tale that shows the human impact of an unjust institution. It can seem really abstract and hard to understand. So the Diana story is like an entry point for a lot of people. And I suppose what we came to the conclusion is that there would be too much Diana content when people become bored of this very important, very tragic story. And I think that was us watching this musical. Bored.
I know. And like, part of the other thing that we were saying when we were talking about how much is too much Diana is that the portrayals of Diana that we have seen often do tend toward that saintly, perfect mother, perfect woman, people's princess narrative. That's not healthy. And, you know, that we do want more nuanced and, you know, perhaps more unflattering things that show her as a complex woman who had flaws and who was not perfect, as nobody is. And I think this also isn't interested in Diana as a person really at all. It is only interested in Diana, the people's princess, that media narrative, the icon who was worshipped, and it isn't offering anything new about Diana at all.
Yeah, and I think, like,
it's not even trying to.
Yeah, I mean, partly this is a bad musical, right? And then partly it's that this style of musical, the sort of jolly, panto-inspired, zany musical, is like really not the right format to tell the story of a woman whose tragic death is still part of living memory. And I, like we were saying with like the paparazzi, you can't enjoy them as cartoon villains when like you can remember what the end result was of it. But I think it's also a real signpost that we don't need or want anymore the whole story of Diana's life told in 2 hours.
Yeah. I think something like Spencer, which focuses on a much smaller period to build up a fuller and more complex portrait of Diana, is so much more interesting and worthwhile And, you know, even though there are the Anne Boleyn ghost sequences and the visions and that stuff, it actually feels more realistic or more true than, you know, when you're trying to understand someone as unknowable as Diana. I think there's so much more value in that kind of storytelling than in Diana the musical.
Yeah, like, it's trying to, you know, understand the story of Diana from the inside out, as opposed to this musical, which is, like, so external and, like, what are the big moments that happened that were in the papers and that everyone's talked about? And what are the outfits and, you know, joining the dots from event to event. But, like, you know, we obviously didn't go into this musical thinking we'd get any new insight into Diana. But personally, I was shocked at how weirdly distasteful I found it. Because I'm not normally one of the people who says that we shouldn't tell Diana's story. I know a lot of people say that we should leave her alone, leave her story alone out of respect. But as I said, like, I think it's important to remember the way that she was treated. But I still recognise that her story isn't like a fun romp that should be pulled out in order to fill seats in a theatre.
Yeah, and I think especially, like, the whole time, even if you were sort of getting into the swing of it, knowing how it ends just really takes the air out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think there's just no reason for this show to exist, and I can't imagine why anybody would spend money to go and see it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a terrible mistake for them to do a preview on Netflix of this show, because I can see people being tempted to go and see it. And, like, I can see a world where I would go and see it if it was on stage. You know, I didn't know what I know about it.
Yeah.
But I think the fact that we can all see how bad it is on Netflix for free if you have Netflix, I don't understand who's going to be buying tickets.
Yeah, and it's not even, like, a fun hate watch.
Yeah. Like, I don't understand how they want you to feel at the end of this. And, like, for that reason, I just can't see how this would be, like, an enjoyable and entertaining evening out.
Me neither.
Well, our next episode, which will be in a few weeks' time, because we're going to take a couple of weekends off.
Yes. But when we come back, we will be talking about COP26. We've got more green royals.
Yeah.
And we'll probably be able to talk about whatever Kate wears to the Earthshot Prize Awards and whatever weird thing Will says.
Yeah. But until then, we hope you take care and stay safe. And thanks so much for listening.
Bye.
Bye. Baby Charles, I'm going to have your baby Charles. Does that make you happy, Charles?